my original inspiration that got me fascinated with the guitar was seeing the movie Rock Around the Clock, which was Bill Haley and the Comets. One of my aunties took me to see that in around about 1959, and I was desperate to get my hands on a guitar.
Eric Clapton, the Blues Breakers, a bit of an influence.
Yes, eventually, but mainly, just the pop boom in the early 60s, the Beatles and the Stones and stuff were what made me decide I was definitely going to get myself a guitar. So I started out learning stuff like that, and playing in local working men's clubs with my own little band that I put together with some school friends, which was called the Vipers. And we were just playing chart stuff, mostly, the Stones and Beatles and things. But it was actually when I heard the Blues Breakers album with Eric Clapton that I kind of started to get really serious, because at first I didn't even know what it was making that sound. I didn't realise it was the guitar for a while.
Now, I came across Bakerloo. February 1968, this was released. When you sit back and you look at this now and you listen to it again, how does it sit with you?
Well, to be honest, I very rarely do listen to it. Maybe I listen to a little bit of something occasionally, but I really very rarely listen to any of my stuff. I've just never really enjoyed doing that much. But when I do hear it, it sounds like what it was, which was three very naive kids in a studio for the first time, not really knowing what they were supposed to do, other than just play as if they were on stage. Around the Midlands,
at the time, there was quite a, quote, scene, wasn't there? The likes of Plant and Bonham used to be around you. Met and Cozy Powell was around there as well. I loved reading about how, you did things like you found yourself on the same bill as what became Black Sabbath, who were Earth at the time. You knew Bill Ward very well.
Yes, we played with Earth a lot because we had the same management, which was a guy called Jim Simpson, who had a company called Big Bear. He was in Edgbaston, and he had three bands. He had us, Earth, and the Locomotive. And because Earth and Bakerloo were both playing pretty much the same kind of stuff, we used to actually do a lot of gigs together, and we made our very first trip abroad together. None of us had ever been abroad before, and we got a gig on a festival in Belgium. So the two bands drove over there in convoy and stayed in this very cheap little hotel. We had a room each. Each band had its own room. So we got on really great with them, and they were so hard up. I remember one gig that we played together somewhere in Staffordshire, maybe in Stoke or somewhere. And we couldn't get our van started. It was in the middle of winter and there was a lot of snow, and our van was really cold and it wouldn't start when we'd loaded up and wanted to set off to get home. So the Earth boys were helping us to get it going. They were giving us a push. And I remember very clearly Ozzy was dressed in his dad's pyjama jacket because he didn't actually have a shirt to his name.
These wonderful stories. Henry's Blues House, the blues club that you used to run.
Well, yes, we kind of put that together in conjunction with Jim Simpson, mainly to provide a place where we could play the music we wanted to play, because although the blues was starting to take off around Birmingham, most of the gigs we could get were in pubs, and they sometimes didn't really want you to play blues all night, so we had to compromise and play some sort of blues rock, I suppose you'd call it now, but more, kind of Rolling Stones stuff and Hendrix and stuff. So in order to be able to play the real blues that we wanted to play at least once a week, we opened this club on Tuesday nights. and called it Henry's Blues House.
You used to get quite a few people coming down. Plant and Bonham were regular visitors, weren't they?
Yes. Robert Plant and John Bonham used to drop by quite often, and much to the terror of our drummer, because the drummer in Bakerloo was a guy called John Hinch, who sadly passed away very recently. But he had a second-hand Premier kit, which wasn't the most robust kit in the world. And once John Bonham got on it, I mean, it just ended up all over the room, you know. And John used to dread him showing up. But yeah, and Cozy too, you know, Cozy would come down and sit in with us as well. And we had some fantastic nights there.
You were the support for Zeppelin at their debut gig at the Marquee Club in 1968. Yes, right. Do you have any recollection of that night?
Yes, I remember watching them and not being terribly impressed, really. And I remember that John was a little worried afterwards because he'd actually been persuaded to give up his gig with Tim Rose at the time to join Zeppelin, and he took a lot of convincing to actually agree to do it, because he was on a very nice salary with Tim Rose, and that was pretty rare at the time. And so after the gig at the Marquee, he was not sure if he'd made the right decision.
You did vocals as well, didn't you, in Bakerloo? But you always said that you didn't really feel that comfortable singing behind the mic. You didn't really like your voice.
No, that's right. I think Terry Poole, the bass player, and myself used to share the vocals pretty much equally. And I didn't mind doing it, but I just never really had a very high opinion of my vocal abilities. But my idols were people like Stevie Winwood and Ray Charles, and, you know, my standards were very high, really.
Well, there's nothing wrong with starting with high aspiration, that's for sure. Did you ever think, though, that when just before Bakerloo folded and packed it in, that you should actually look around for potentially a great vocalist in the style that you were looking for? Somebody like a Robert Plant? Yes,
I actually really wanted to do that, and I can't remember whether we discussed it as the actual Bakerloo band. But yeah, we did actually audition a guy that came from Nottingham, who was a really good singer, but he was a real arsehole, so we couldn't actually deal with that. But when Bakerloo split up, my original plan was to reform the band with Cozy Powell on drums and Dave Pegg on bass. And we rehearsed together for 2 or 3 weeks, and we were planning to try and find a frontman, stroke vocalist. And we had a lot of ideas and tried a few people out, but nothing really worked out. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a call from John Heisman, and that was the end of that. Yeah.
Coliseum, this is, yeah. That must have been a great day. You're sat at home, and all of a sudden, John Heisman from Coliseum, who were right at the forefront, weren't they, fusing jazz, rock, and the blues together. And they had a significant reputation at the time. So, I mean, you must have been walking around with a big smile on your face that day.
Yes. Well, I mean, I had to wait until I'd done the audition before I could have too big a smile on my face. But yeah, I'd seen them play a couple of times at Mother's, which was my local hangout. And they were absolutely stunning. So when I was offered the chance to play with them, I couldn't resist it. I felt really bad because Cozy and me had been talking about having a band together for a year or so, and we were really good mates, and I went off to audition for Colosseum and decided to join them, and felt really bad about letting Cozy and Peggy down. But in fact, very soon after that, Cozy joined Jeff Beck and Peggy joined Fairport Convention. So we all ended up with great gigs and stayed the best of mates Anyway.
The 2 years that you spent with Colosseum, memorable years?
Oh, very much so, yes. I mean, some of my fondest memories.
The albums that you were on with them, they included the double live album recorded in Manchester?
Yes, that's right. The first album I did with them was actually the American version of the Valentine Suite, because when I joined the band, the Valentine Suite had been released in England but not in America. And the American record label very much wanted me to be on the new album, so we actually re-recorded some of the tracks from the Valentine Suite, including the title track, and did a few new things. So that was the first recordings. They were the first recordings that I was on with Colosseum. The first entire album that we did together was The Daughter of Time.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't really that happy with, to be honest. It was like going in a little bit too much of the prog direction for me.
That double live album, the one that was recorded in Manchester, October 1971, it got really good reviews, and it was also said that this is where Steve Marriot first heard you live, or recorded actually, and decided that you were the man for him in Humble Pie after Peter Frampton.
Yes, that's so I understand. He went out and bought the album and listened to my solo on Skellington, actually, and was quite impressed. And he called me that evening and said, "Why don't you come out and meet up with me?" And I actually drove out to his house in Essex that very night and sat and jammed with him, and that was that. I was a member of Humble Pie.
And what was it like walking into the studio, meeting Steve Marriot for the first time and working with him?
So I wanted something fresh and new. I wasn't really in awe of Steve in terms of him being a pop star, because I kind of, the pop scene was something I'd left behind a few years before. But I was always a big fan of Steve's voice. That was one of the main factors that made it a very exciting move for me.
Was there any discussion about the musical direction that the band were going to take? And again, I saw a few quotes from allegedly made by Steve saying, "Listen, we've had enough of the direction of this flowery blouse direction that Pete Frampton wants to take us in. We want something that's we want something with a harder edge." So were you expected to go into a rock band?
Yes, I never heard him say that. I never heard that phrase before. It's quite funny. But they were actually planning to kind of toughen it up a little bit, and that suited me fine. In a way, it was kind of going back to the Bakerloo approach, really. Our blues rock.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must have been hugely satisfying when the first album comes out as well, Smoking, in 1972, because it turned into the most successful album that they'd had. Listening to it now, it's still got a fresh and vibrant feel, and you were top 10 in the US. There were various singles off of the album. There were collaborations with all sorts of people. Stephen Stills was on it as well. Yeah. When you look back at that now, is that one of the most satisfying times professionally?
Yes, one of the most exciting as well. We had a lot of fun making that album, and of course it was very satisfying for me that it was so successful, because I was slightly nervous about how the Humble Pie audience were going to react to me, because Pete was a great player and a great singer, and he was very popular with the Humble Pie fans.
He was very gracious, by the way. Peter Frampton said Smoking was his favourite Humble Pie album, even though he's not on it. He said, because I'm just a real fan of the band.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. It is, in fact, one of the few things that I've been involved with that I still enjoy listening to. Yeah, Hot and Nasty It's just such a great track, and it's. I think part of the reason it still sounds so fresh is because it was we captured a freshness at the time. Hot and Nasty was actually a jam that we had in the studio. It hadn't even been written as a song. We just were jamming, and we recorded the jam session, and then Steve put some lyrics to it. Then Stephen Stills walked in out of the blue and came up with an idea for a backing vocal line, and it was just magic, the whole experience.
A lot of discussion about 30 Days in the Hole, about where and how the title came from, what it was about. Steve Marriot said that it was something to do with Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney in a movie. Others thought it was Paul Newman, Somebody Up There Likes Me.
Yes, I think it was from The Hustler, wasn't it? That's what I always thought. There was a line I thought it was a Paul Newman line, about doing 30 Days in the Hole, that Steve had picked up on.
It's very interesting to see how American audiences, how shall we say, understood some of the lyrics, references to Red Leb and Newcastle Brown seemed to cause some confusion.
Well, Chicago Green, I think the first line is Chicago Green, isn't it? And I think pretty much all our fans in America knew immediately what the song was about when they heard that.
Just go back to Steve Marriot. His work ethic was significant, wasn't it? I mean, the stories again, and you read his biographies and people who've written extensively about his career, he literally worked himself almost to collapse from nervous exhaustion, didn't he, in the recording of that?
Well, yes. I mean, Steve was, I wouldn't say he was a workaholic as much as a funaholic, but his work was fun to him, and basically all he wanted to do was make music and dance and party. It was all it was all part of the same thing for Steve. He would sit down and think when it was time to come up with some lyrics. He would sit down and kind of be serious for half an hour while he did that, but basically he just wanted to keep going. He wanted to stay in the studio forever.
The follow-up didn't quite achieve the same level of success and notoriety. He did Eat It and then onto Thunderbox and Street Raps. The inclusion of the female backing trio, the Blackberries, how did you find that?
Well, we all loved it at the time. We'd had backing vocals on Smoking anyway, so it was just a natural progression when we could afford it to have them permanently with the band.
Disappointing when it all sort of came to an end, or did you feel that this has actually now run its course for you?
It had definitely run its course, and Steve had really lost interest in it. Street Rats was a disaster. I mean, it was a very sad time, really, and I was very glad when it was over.
You got together, though, with Cozy Powell again, didn't you, for Strange Brew?
That's right. That was our plan.
Great band name. What happened? Why did that not take off?
Well, basically, I broke my wrist playing football. I was still dreaming of being a footballer, you see. And I was playing in a five-a-side match on a concrete pitch indoors, and I fell and put my hand down, and it was very painful. And when I got home, Cozy was there. He'd driven up to spend the evening, and I'd actually bought a new Gibson 335 that day. It was a 12-string, actually, and I was very excited about it, so I picked it up to demonstrate it to Cozy and discovered I couldn't press the strings down because it was my left hand that I'd hit on the ground when I fell. So Cozy drove me down to the local hospital, and they x-rayed it, and I'd broken the bone that's at the base of the thumb, which affects your grip. And so basically, without that bone, you have no grip. So the very cheery NHS nurse was putting it in plaster for me, and I said, "How long is this going to take to heal?" And she said, the trouble is that's a very fine bone, and sometimes it won't heal. It just never heals. And so I just went white, and I said, well, and then what happens then? And she said, well, you just lose the grip in that hand permanently. And she said, which hand do you write with? And I said, the other one. And she said, oh, that's lucky, isn't it? She was so kind of cheerful, and I was absolutely terrified. But anyway, so I spent the next 6 weeks with my arm in a cast, and in the meantime, Cozy was offered a gig by Richie Blackmore with Rainbow, and so he decided to take it. And Greg was still hanging out with Steve a lot in Steve's studio at the Beehive Cottage, and Steve was putting a solo record together, and Greg was playing on that. So he was quite happy anyway. So it all just kind of fell apart, really.
Much was made or has been made in the years since of you staying over with John Lord in his Malibu house. Did you actually ever come close to actually joining Deep Purple? Or was it just you were staying with a mate?
Well, that was the reason I was there, because Richie had left the band and they were looking for a replacement. And John rang me up and said, do you fancy coming over and hanging out in my place in Malibu for a little while and get together with the band and see how it goes? And I said, yeah, sure. And it was a very nice time. We had a couple of sessions in a rehearsal studio. And it was great just jamming together, but the problem was that they were looking for someone to literally take over Richie Blackmore's role, which was more than just a guitar player. Richie was the main songwriter of the band, and that was the main thing. So they needed someone that could come up with lots of songs, and I wasn't.
Who did they come up with? Was it Tommy Bolin?
Tommy Bolin they eventually settled on.
So you were in those the jamming sessions. You had obviously Ian Pace was there and John Lord was there. Coverdale there, and Glenn Hughes.
Yes, and Glenn Hughes. Yes, and I had a very nice evening with Glenn. Well, I say an evening. It actually lasted till lunchtime the next day when Glenn said that he was going around to meet his mate. He was going around to visit David Bowie, who was a mate of his, that night, and asked me if I wanted to go along, and I said, yeah, sure. So we went round to David Bowie's house, and we were jamming all night, and Glenn and me had got this really kind of nice John McLaughlin style riff, and David put some lyrics to it, and we formed a band. We were going to form something. We were going to form the new Mahavishnu Orchestra with vocals.
Ah, right. Yes, I remember them. Well, I remember them only because I was talking to a promoter called Danny Zalisco from over in the States who actually promoted them back in the 70s, and I didn't know who they were, so I had to do a bit of research. So I went back and had a listen.
Well, I was completely blown away by them at the time, and that had kind of taken me in a slightly different direction again while I was still with Humble Pie. I'd started to listen to Mahavishnu, and I attempted to get Steve to listen to it a couple of times, but he wouldn't have any of it at all. There's a load of old bollocks.
Moving on, there was another collaboration which stood out. David Byron, who'd left Uriah Heep arguably at their peak. How did you two get together for what was Rough Diamond or the Byron Band?
Well, David had left Uriah Heep and he wanted to form a new band, and he was being managed by a guy called Steve Marriot, who had actually got into the business by getting a job when he left university. He got a job with the Jerry Brunn agency, which was Coliseum's management and agency. So I'd known Steve for a few years by then, and he just called me and said he was trying to put a band together around David, and would I be interested? And I just got back from Steve's. I'd been playing with Steve actually on his tour of America to launch his first solo album, and that had finished, and I just got back to the UK and didn't really know what I was going to do, and so I thought, well, this could be interesting. I'd also been working. I'd rode a good friend of mine who was a brilliant keyboard player called Damon Butcher into Steve's band, and so we'd both kind of come back after the tour with Steve and were wondering what we were going to do. So here we were presented with a singer and frontman who was looking for musicians, and it seemed like a good opportunity.
Do you end up doing some support with Peter Frampton on a US track? And the US record company tried to bill you as something of a super group, ex-Heap,
yes,
Pie and Wings.
Yes, that was the record company's publicity campaign was really kind of killed us off before we got started, because we were so embarrassed about it all.
Well, you can imagine, though, the record company marketing execs sitting in there going, "Guys, we've got these three legends here. We've got to get out there. We've got to package them."
Well, they produced these massive billboards which appeared all over America, which said 5 of the most important musicians in the world, and we just felt so embarrassed by that. It's horrendous.
Rough time, and
so
it sort of fell apart. A shame, really, because David Byron was a great frontman. I did see him on that in the Byron Band, as it was. Great frontman. Sad end as well, though.
Yeah. I think if we could have just been left to do what we wanted to do and take our time with it, we could have actually had a good band. But we were rushed into the studio to come up with the product because Island Records was waiting to give us $1 million and rush it out into the shops, put their posters and billboards up. And it just never really happened for us,
From then on, there is just a dizzying array of talent. Some of the real rock royalty. Roger Daltrey crops up a lot of times. Cozy Powell's there. John Anderson and Jack Bruce. And out of all of those, I think you've said in the past that working with Jack Bruce live was the most satisfying thing that you've done.
Yes, it was absolutely fantastic. Musically very challenging and very satisfying, but just so much fun and just absolutely inspiring to be on a stage with Jack Bruce night after night, listening to that voice and that bass playing. It was just fantastic.
One other project, Ken Hensley, another ex-Heap man, with the Ken Hensley Band or Shotgun. Again, it's another band that I saw right at the beginning of my days of going to see rock bands. I saw them live. It nearly got off the ground. Did you actually play? Because it's very hard to find out details of who actually played on things. But I did buy their one and only album, which was called Free Spirit. Were you on that?
No, I only really agreed to do I think after Ken had done the album, he was planning a tour, and I bumped into his roadie at a party, I think in London, and he said, "Oh, Ken would really love to get in touch with you." And Ken was just putting a band together to go on the road in America, and I wasn't doing anything, and I thought, yeah, fine, I'll go out for a few weeks with Ken, that would be fun. But that was a disaster because he was desperately trying to launch his own solo career, and we soon discovered that everywhere we went it was being billed as Uriah Heep. Ken was devastated by it, and he tried very hard to get it all changed, and in the end he put his foot down and said, "Look, next time we arrive at a gig, if it says Uriah Heep, we're not doing the gig," and that's that. And of course that's what happened. It was only a week or so into the tour, and he just said, "Okay, that's it, the tour's finished until they change the billing." And it all got very nasty. The agent turned out to be a real crook who ended up in prison, actually.
Oh, didn't he disappear with a load of money that was supposed to be keeping you guys actually out on the road on tour?
Yes, it also turned out that the road crew were working for him, and when we got up the next morning after Ken had said that enough is enough, we discovered that all our gear had gone. The crew had taken the truck with all our gear and were basically trying to hold us to ransom. And we were stranded in Dallas. Fortunately, I had a return ticket back to London, but not all the guys did, and it was a very difficult time, really.
And lastly, now, some people might not be aware, I mean, as well as being something of a rock legend, a rock god, your extensive repertoire of movie and film work, including the likes of the 18th Bond film, which was Tomorrow Never Dies. What was it like being part of the Bond franchise, as it were? And did you get to go on set? Did you meet James Bond?
No, nothing like that. I was just booked to play the guitar on a couple of sessions, you know, so I did actually get to play the theme, you know, do the twangy ding, 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 which was great fun. I was quite proud of having the chance to do that.
And you did Notting Hill as well, didn't you? Which was another massive hit.
Yes, I was much more involved in Notting Hill. I was actually involved in putting the whole music track together, and that went on for several weeks. And that was a lot of fun. Anyway.
What are your plans moving forward? Is there anybody in particular left who you haven't worked with, who you would like to collaborate with?
Well, in actual fact, the plan at the moment is for a new version of Coliseum to start gigging, which we're hoping to do on September the 1st. I think about 8 or 9 dates in the UK booked from September the 1st to the 12th. And all the details of that are on my website, which is clemclempson.com. And you can also find details on John Heisman's Facebook page. I suppose if I could choose someone to work with right just off the top of my head, I would have to say Snarky Puppy. I mean, they are actually absolutely stunning, I think, you know, and I would be very happy to do a gig with them.